All right, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Bag Talk podcast. Got a very special guest with me. Um, Guy in my area dropped a lot of gems for me. We got to get, it's funny story how we kind of met each other. So I was listening to the Bigger Pockets rookie podcast, and I was listening to an episode, casually. I think at the time you had eight properties, 24 units. Then they wanted you to give you the background, introduce yourself and all that, and you were like, yeah, I'm from Hampton Roads, and I hear a couple people that are from Hampton Roads. So I was like, oh, okay, no, that's cool. And then he was like, some people call it the 757, the 75. I was like, oh, nah, he really from Hampton Roads.
Really the backyard.
So I started doing a little research, found out we had a mutual friend, and then I went to message you on Facebook, and then I saw that you had messaged me a couple weeks earlier that I had never seen. I was like, dang, what are the chances that I'd be looking for you a couple weeks after you was looking for me? So before I steal all your thunder, you want to introduce yourself for some of the people that might not know you on the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And first of all, thank you for having me today on the show. It's just a blessing, the network and to kind of link up, with you and like you mentioned, I had come across you before I had even gone on the Bigger Pockets rookie podcast, and just saw what you were doing, through wealth building, through entrepreneurship, working in the area, building, giving back to the community. And it really just kind of drew me. I was like, wow, I want to meet this guy. Saw mutual friends, the fact of, your age group, demographic, all you were doing, and just that commonality from the 757. I was like, man, this is awesome, and it's good to link up. But I mean, as you mentioned, I'm Marsay. I go by the name of the property pastor. And the reason that I go by that name is that I'm an actual pastor here in Hampton. I've been pastoring for about 6 years, I think. Yeah, about 6 years, going on 7 years now. I'm here at a local church, and I invest in real estate. Like you mentioned, portfolio. I actually have 9 properties now. Thankfully, been able to close my first deal of 2021. And I've been doing this since about 2017, just constantly just grinding, picking up new properties, doing bird deals, working through with contractors. I don't manage my own stuff. I've got a couple of property managers who manage my portfolio for me. But, for me, first and foremost, it's definitely my faith, my walk with God. And I actually, have a podcast of my own and a YouTube channel of my own called Kingdom Legacy Builders. And for me, it's all about building that legacy. I have 3 kids, that mean the world to me, just been blessed with a wife and 3 children. And, my portfolio is really for them. It's to own my own time, to own assets, to create generational wealth, and have something to pass on, to my kids. So it's just been blessed, man, to kind of build up the portfolio over the past 3.5 years. And it's been a journey, lessons along the way. But, like I said, just grateful to be on today, grateful to talk a little bit about real estate, talk a little bit about generational wealth, man, and just kind of build from there. So thanks for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, so how did you get into like wealth building, personal finance? Like when did that become important to you? Was that something that you grew up on, that maybe your parents taught you, or something that you learned a little later in life? Like how'd that start for you?
Yeah, good question, man. Fortunately for me, I grew up in a pretty good home. My dad is a business owner, and he's a general contractor here in the area. And I grew up, climbing ladders, working with him in the summertime in his business. And it just kind of taught me a little bit about, building for yourself, owning your own things and generating your own business. So it's kind of ingrained in me at a young age. And really for me, going around with my dad, seeing that he was working every day. But I was that kid whose pops would go on the field trips. Have a black dad on a field trip. That was a thing back in the day. But
Right.
my dad was that guy. So when he wanted to, kind of break away and hang out with us, he was able to do that. So that kind of instilled in me, hey, be your own boss, kind of go your own way. But at the same time, my folks also instilled in me going to college.
Mm.
So I wasn't the guy that wanted to be climbing the ladder, cleaning up on the job site every day. So I'm like, cool, I'm going to school, man. I went and got my engineering degree and just kind of worked probably a good maybe 10 or so years before the light bulb started to click, and I was like, man, I'm making a decent wage, building my 401k up. but yo, I'm gonna be like 65 before I get to shut this thing down. So just kind of, from there, I kind of got that revelation maybe about 10 years ago. And like a lot of people, you're in college, you might get connected with, what they call it, network marketing, the ACNs of the world, the Amways of the world. You start reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and books like that. But at the same time, just kind of figuring out. So I'd say for me, it was kind of instilled from a young age, but I still had to kind of figure it out on my own. Like my dad knew about being a business owner, but in that, if you understand, about cash flow quadrant and recognizing the difference between owning a business and owning a job, right? I think what I learned was really more so owning a job and not owning a business. So as time went on, those light bulbs started to click. And nowadays, I'm really trying to just acquire assets. But I would say it was definitely kind of that seed was planted, early on in life for me.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny that you mentioned like MLM and like personal development and rich dad poor dad, because that's exactly how I got into like wealth building and all that stuff. So like accounting was my degree, but
Mm-hmm.
I always thought of accounting from like a textbook standpoint. Like, all right, I'm
Right.
gonna go work for a company. They're gonna have me do their books, blah blah blah. But then I got introduced to a multi-level marketing company, and they were big on personal development. So
Yep.
I ran into Jim Rohn, and Jim Rohn kind of led me into Robert Kiyosaki. And then after Robert Kiyosaki, it was like, boom. I was like, oh, I already got the background, already got
Yep.
the foundation in
Right.
accounting. So like, let me start doing this wealth building thing for me instead of always doing it for a company. So I
Absolutely.
think it's funny that you mentioned that, because that's really a similar path that I went on. Was real estate just like was it the traditional avenue for you because like your father was into it, or how did real estate become your main source of like wealth building?
I'd say I was exposed to it early, but didn't understand it fully. So kind of like you mentioned, like going through the, multi-level marketing, you're kind of learning tools, right? And as you're learning tools, you figure out, okay, where's the best place for me to apply this tool? And I believe in multiple streams of income. So, early on, man, I was trying to figure out the stock market. I was reading all of Warren Buffett's books, and things like that. And just I was trying to pick growth stocks and all this kind of stuff. And I finally figured out after a while, I can't beat the market. You know, I just wasn't smart enough to beat the market. So real estate kind of became that thing where I had experience in it. My family owned a few properties, and it was something I could kind of build off of that foundation. But then one day, it kind of clicked where this whole concept of leverage is what differentiated real estate from everything else. And, for leverage, for me, it's really just about, hey, I can take maximum 20% down, but benefit off of 100% of the overall asset versus with that stock, right? I really couldn't control it.
Yeah,
And the thing for me about real estate, if I want to increase the value of my property, I could go in and do an upgrade. I could burr it, right? I could, upgrade the units themselves and charge more rent. So I just felt like I had a lot more control. And then on top of it, I kind of had a model that I could already follow. My dad, when I started, I think he had like 2 or 3 rental properties. They just kind of showed me a few things to do. But then some of the people that he did work for, they actually became my mentors. And I would call them up like, hey, I'm Matt's son and I'm doing real estate. Can I come talk to you? Can I ask you questions? Can I take you to lunch? And they were like, wow, I already know your dad. I know his character. I know who he is. And now, and they were willing to pour into me and just kind of, show me some of the ins and outs of the business. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so leverage for me is like that's mind blowing, right? Because it's like I try to explain to people like the difference between real estate and like stocks or 401k is like if you go to somebody and say, should I invest in a 401k? The conversation will probably go, yeah. So if you invest in a 401k and put $10,000 in today and then put $500 in each month for the next 30 years,
right.
then you'll have this $2.5 million or whatever.
Yeah.
But real estate, you can go and get a $100,000 property, put 15% down. So you put 15,000 into it, and then
Mhm.
that could be all you ever put into it. And
Right.
then you can, everything after that is just is cash flow. So when you're talking about your money, your investment, your principal, there's such a massive difference because of what you said, that leverage in real estate. Whereas you put the money in sometimes one time,
Right.
unless you got to do capital expenditures, maintenance, but a lot of the times that's coming out of your cash
Yeah,
flow
right.
anyway. So
Tenants
it's
paying
still
for that.
not your money. So
Absolutely.
leverage just changes the whole game for me.
It's a game changer. It's a
Yeah,
game
yeah,
changer. I mean, statistically, I mean, I can't remember the statistic, but the majority of millionaires and billionaires in this country, did so through real estate. And for
yeah.
me, it was, like I said, my skill set matched it. The numbers made sense, and the only thing that I regret is that I didn't start 10 years prior to when I actually did.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk about your portfolio a little bit. So like how'd you scale it? Like in your first year, I want to say you got your first one in 2017. Like in your first year, did you do five and the next year you did one? Like how'd that start out? And then like what's your portfolio look like now?
So yeah, so basically, I've kind of grown at a clip of 2 to 3 properties a year.
Okay.
And starting in 2017, I think I bought my first property maybe around September, October. But man, I took the first 6 months and I read everything I could. I was on listen to every podcast, read every single book I could get a hold of, went to all the local network, RIA groups and meetups and things like that. But my first property, I bought it actually cash. Now,
Okay.
not traditional cash from just money I saved. I use the equity in my house. So I have, me and my dad is a general contractor. We built my house, right? Me and him built it, so that just gave me a ton of equity. So that gave me the kind of the seed money to start my business. And, so I bought this for, it was a quadplex. So it was a fourplex, man. And I got it was a home run hit, and that's very rare. But that first deal, it was a fourplex, in Newport News. I did a kind of a mini burr on it, just did some upgrades, put new windows, new siding, increased my rents. I think I increased the rents from like 1,700 to like maybe 23 over the course of a year and a half per month. So, got a real nice bump in rents. And then after I did the burr deal on it, I was able to refinance that out and pretty much get that property for very little, initial investment. So that was my first deal. And then after that, I just kind of rolled that money into my next one. And so my portfolio really is kind of comprised of primarily small multifamily. So I do multifamily investing. That's going to be duplexes, triplexes, and quads. And then I also have some single family houses that I rent out the individual rooms from those homes. And the reason that I like to have small multifamily is because it kind of gives me a hedge against vacancy. So if I get one tenant that's gone, so 3 out of 4, I'm still covering my bills, right? But if I have a single family house and I have a vacancy for 3, 4 months, if that's my first property, that could be kind of hard, right? That might have wiped me out. But over the years, like I said, I've just kind of built up each, I try to get at least 2 to 3 properties, per year. And this year I'm trying to, basically double that. So go up to like 5 or 6 acquisitions this year. But I've scaled my portfolio through learning creative financing, business credit, a little bit of hard money, just starting to use, and then other people's money. So private money, has been a big part of it for me as well. So I think getting to the creative space, and then picking up, lease option deals, lease purchase deals, things like that have allowed me to become a lot more efficient in my growing and in my scaling. Because one of the problems I think we run into as investors is you really grind to get deal number one.
Yeah.
And what happens is the cash flow from deal number one is typically not always enough to buy deal number two, right? Unless you're doing like a first time home buyer setup where you can move on to the next house and you just kind of leave tenants in place. If you're trying to scale traditionally and you don't have that first time home buyer advantage, you can basically run out of money, right? So you got to learn other tools to kind of build. And that's really what I had to do. I had to use a combo of my in just the home equity that I still had. I kept rolling that into new deals.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So how are you finding these deals? So I talk to a lot of people that say I want to get started in real estate,
Mm-hmm.
but like I'm looking and I can't find the deal and it's just not happening for me and the market's hot and this, that, and the third. So like how are you finding deals and how is it so effective that you can get multiple deals a year?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, right now, our market is so competitive in the MLS space. You know, what I mean by the MLS space is, hey, I'm just gonna go on Zillow and I'm gonna type in my criteria and look for a house. I mean, I've seen houses by the time I get the alert on my phone and I reach out to my agent, my agent's like, it's already in the contract.
Yeah.
So, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, no, today. So that does create a lot of problems. And what I've done is, and what I recommend people do is cast a wide net. And what I mean by that, you know, when you only got one tool, and if the only tool you guys are a hammer, everything's gonna look like a nail. You
Yeah.
know, and you know, if you're trying to out of state invest, that's kind of tricky, that's kind of hard. But I say cast a broad net. And for me, you know, obviously the MLS is just always going for me. The I network a lot. So in other words, if I deal with a private seller, for example, and when I say private seller, it's just somebody who's in the off market space. They're not trying to, you know, list their house. They're not working with a realtor. So I may send them direct mail. I use Deal Machine, driving for dollars. I actually will go on my Deal Machine and take Google pictures and cheat instead of driving to the house. I just drop a Google picture in the Deal Machine and sends them a postcard with the picture. Kind of saves me some time. But I do off market, you know, off market stuff. I deal with wholesalers a lot. So I market with wholesalers and they know my criteria. So if they see a, you know, a small multifamily, they'll shoot me the criteria and things like that. And then the networking, I think, is big. And so for me, when I buy my first off market house, one of my first questions is, hey, do you have any other houses? You know,
Okay.
because there's a lot of people who may have one investment that they sell, but guess what? They've got 4 or 5 more in their portfolio. So I mentioned my first deal was a quad, and I purchased that quad, and it was actually the family who owned it used to own Mary Helen's, the famous soul food joint here in Hampton. So when I was talking to him, like, hey, do you have other properties that you will be willing to sell? So I bought the first quad, but then on top of it, they had another house they were selling. And now that same family owns a 21 unit apartment complex and a triplex. And I'm trying to get it all, you know, at the end of the day. And that's where you just have to build relationships. And I think you got to put yourself out there, be willing to be the real estate guy or be willing to be the real estate girl. Because what happens is when people know what you're about, when you put your goals out there, you tell folks who you are, what you're about, when they have an opportunity, they bring it to you. Right. I mean, I bought a duplex from my handyman, right? The guy who was my handyman, he was
Yeah.
like, hey man, I got this duplex. I'm not gonna finish it. I wanted to bring it to you first. Man, I got a duplex for 23 grand, you know? So that's what I'm saying. I mean, you just got to put it out there, you know, and I think cast a broad net. Don't just look for the MLS. If all you're looking for the MLS, you're going to get frustrated because the deals are just going so fast. You really got to cast a broad net and let the world know, you know, who you are and what you're about.
Yeah. 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 So there's a couple things you said there. So as far as the market being hot, so like the market's so hot that at times, like you said that sometimes when you see deals, like they're gone by the time you hit your agent up. So like it's been so bad that I'll even bypass my agent sometimes. I'm like, yo, I don't want to waste his time.
Right.
People on texting him asking about it. Let me just hit the seller
The
up
seller.
and see if it's even on the market still before I even ask my agent if we can go look at it. Right. So the MLS is crazy right now. And then all those strategies that you're using to bypass the MLS, I hear less competition, right? So even taking it back to simple economics, right? When you have a lot of competition or a lot of demand for something and the supply is low, then the price is going to go up because people are able to bid the price. There's low supply, high demand. So what you're doing is you're bypassing where the supply is low and going where there's less competition. So there's less opportunity for people to bid against you and
Absolutely.
bid those prices up. And
Yep.
then you also said, like, put it in the air, let people know. So that's one of the things that multi-level marketing helped me get away from, like, because you join a multi-level marketing company and people already have a preconceived notion about it. Right. So when I joined mine, I realized that everybody's not going to like what you do. Everybody's not going to want to listen to what you do, you know, but when you put it out there. So for me, for example, I like boxing. I love boxing, big boxing fan. So I used to be a little tentative about like putting boxing stuff on my personal Instagram page, just because I was like, oh, people don't want to see this. Like, they don't scroll right past it. I'm probably getting on their nerves. But then I was like, I mean, it's my page. If you don't want to
Right.
look at it, then just scroll right
Just keep
past it.
going.
Then what I realized both in finance and like in boxing, that now when people see me, they're either talking about one or two things. They're talking about finances because they know I'm the finance guy, right? I'm the accounting guy. I'm the wealth building guy. Or they're talking about boxing or music or something that I like to talk about. So I realized that if you cultivate what you like and what you want, the energy that you want in your space, then people will reciprocate it and bring it back to you because
Yep.
that's what they know when they see you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's branding, right? You got to build a brand,
Yeah.
and that brand, like you mentioned, it's going to attract people to you, and I mean, I just got a phone with a guy earlier. He said, "Hey, I got a sub 2 deal in Atlanta. Are you interested in it?" And I'm like, I didn't reach out to him. He
Right.
sent it to me.
Yeah. Yeah, all
For
all
sure.
good stuff, all good stuff. So let's jump into that first deal. Can we dive a little deeper in that first deal? Talk about some numbers and then explain Burr. You've mentioned the
Okay.
Burr method a couple times. Can you explain that a little more?
Absolutely. Yeah. So in my, I guess, searching, in my research, when it came down to what was I going to invest, what was my vehicle going to be, when back in the day, I thought, I'm watching HGTV, everybody flips houses, and
Yeah,
of course I
right.
had no understanding of, capital gains. I had no understanding of building income versus building wealth. But in the midst of just listening to different videos, in the midst of, kind of trying to figure out what was going to work for me, Burr really stood out. So Burr stands for buy the property, rehab the property, rent the property out, refinance that property, and then repeat it all over again. And excuse me, the thing that really drew me to it was, hey, this is a very efficient way to reuse my capital, because we're all gonna money capital. The challenge with real estate is it is a high income barrier to entry with income can be a challenge, right? Getting 20% down, even if it's $100,000 house, people don't typically have 20 grand sitting around. We tied it up into Jordans and rims, right? But
Yeah.
that's another discussion. But for me, right, looking at that first house, I came across it. The wholesaler brought it to me. He's like, "Hey, I got this house for 65 grand, and it's a fourplex." And I'm like, "A fourplex
Right.
for
Yeah.
65 grand?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "What's wrong with it?" and even and it came up through a local RIA group, right? They, just through their email blast, the wholesaler got on there. He said, "Hey, I got this deal," and people were jumping on it, and I just tried to get out to it as fast as I could. So I paid cash for it out of my HELOC. Like I mentioned, I put 65 down on it. When I when it's all said and done, he got it for 55. So he had a pretty decent markup on his wholesale fee, but still it was well worth it. I was like, man, I would have paid 20 more grand for it for a fourplex. But in buying it, right, I think it had 3 of the units were rented and one of them was vacant. So what I did was the vacant unit, I just took the time to go through that unit and upgrade it, right? So we modernized it, we put new flooring, new appliances in it, redid the bathroom, new windows, just kind of gave it an overhaul. And when I bought it, I think the rent in that particular unit was maybe about 500. But when we rehabbed it, we got a $200 boost on the rent. So from that, right, we were able to go in, and then, like I mentioned, we did the vinyl siding on the outside, we did the windows, went back to the bank, and at that point, we already had all of our tenants in. We had raised the rents up to where we wanted. So we went to the bank, and the bank was basically willing to refinance 75% of the loan to value ratio. So all in, right, from the standpoint of the 65 I paid, putting in that additional money, I pretty much got all my money back out of it and was able to kind of reuse my capital. Now it tied my capital up for a while, right? But when it was all said and done, I got it pretty much back, and I still own this rental property that's generating cash flow every single month. So that one for me, and it's funny because that property is still the number one producer in my portfolio today. So I mean, but when I got it, man, it wasn't a pretty house. A lot of times people are like, only invest in things that you would live in. My wife would not have lived in that house. Now, once I redid it, she might have lived in the unit that we redid or whatever.
Yeah.
But I say all of that because you don't hit home runs every day, but that first deal was definitely a home run. I mean, we're right now cash flowing from that property about $1,000 a month. So it definitely was a great performer overall in my business. Now, all my other deals haven't been like that, but that first one definitely got my appetite going to say, hey, we can do something with this for sure.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I would call a banger
Yes, man.
or a home run. And
I'm
I
still
think
looking for a repeat of that one.
right, right, right. I think what a lot of people get stuck up in doing is they look for a home run every time, right? And only want home runs. They
Right.
listen to the podcast, they listen to the YouTube, they read the books, and they pick the best deal that they've ever heard of and say, I want that deal.
Right.
But in reality, when you talk to experienced investors like yourself, you'll find that maybe 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 is a home
Yep.
run. But
Yep.
everyone's not going to be a home run, but you got to make some base hits, get the
Yep.
bases loaded, and then maybe you'll get a grand slam, maybe you'll get a bunch of runs, but everyone's not going to be a home run.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's important, like you mentioned, to kind of be okay with getting base hits. Even if your first deal is a base hit, you still have acquired an asset that is going to pay you,
Yeah,
that's going to increase your net worth. It's going to help you to build, like I talked about, that legacy. That's something I can pass on, and if I set my systems up properly with property management and different things like that, and go through and get my asset protection all straightened out, my kids will benefit for generations from this. So for me, it's just getting to that place where how am I acquiring income producing assets and treating the dollars in my pocket as employees, right?
yeah,
Because I think our money should make money for us, instead of just being stuff that we can go and waste it on, entertainment and what I call doodads from Rich Dad Poor Dad.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, those base hits are critical, man. And I think, and I would tell everybody, make sure you do know your criteria, right? And your criteria is like, what do I want from a cash on cash return? What do I want from a monthly cash flow? Because you can mistake a base hit, for a strikeout, just because you got up the bat and you swung the bat and you bought a bad deal. And I see this happen. Some people are so desperate to get that first deal,
Yeah.
and they either sometimes folks want the home run, but then sometimes they're like, I just want to buy my first property. They
Mhm.
don't recognize they may be overpaying for their property and it's not going to generate returns, or they may try to bank on appreciation alone. Now they're struggling to pay that note every month. And then they come to a seasoned investor, and the seasoned investor buys it for pennies on the dollar just to solve their emotional problem. And I
Yeah.
tell people, I'm like, please don't be that guy. I'll fix your problem, but I really don't that's not the way I want to grow my
Right.
business.
Right. Right. Yeah, I made a video about that a couple weeks ago, just saying that everything that glitters isn't gold,
Mm-hmm.
right? We see people that are getting a new deal every month, or it seems like they're doing a flip every month, or they're investing in this stock and that stock and running this business and that business. But that doesn't mean that they're making prudent business decisions, right?
Yep.
Just because they got 10 rentals doesn't mean they're 10 cash flowing rentals, right? They could be buying stuff that doesn't make sense because they don't know how to run the numbers. So you
Absolutely.
like you said, criteria is so important.
Critical.
And then you also mentioned property management. So it sounds like you don't manage your own properties. Can you talk a little bit about that and why?
Yeah, so I don't manage my own properties. I basically manage my property managers,
Okay.
right? And for me, I don't like dealing with tenants and toilets. At the end of the day, I am a pastor, right? So, and I've had scenarios where people have taken advantage of that,
Yeah.
realizing that, hey, this guy's the pastor, we're going to play on his sympathetic side. We're going to just withhold the rent. And I got to the place where I was like, look, I can't take care of my 3 kids and grown folks,
Yeah.
right? I can't take care of grown-ups. So
Yeah.
I got to that place where I'm like, hey, I'm not, that 10% is well worth it. I can go to sleep at night, and then my property manager is going to take care of it. If the refrigerator is broken, we got capex for that. We if the furnace goes out, whatever, we got capex for that. Go ahead and take care of that. I'll see it in a report. If it's an emergency and it's up to me and I want to decide, give me that option. But at the end of the day, I want to be able to sleep, and I want to work on my business and not in my business. And those are totally different things. If you out there, fixing every toilet, if you out there changing, all the appliances and light bulbs and all this kind of stuff, you can't look for the next deal because
Yeah.
you're going to be so tired and you're not going to have much left. You're not going to have much left for your family. You're not going to have much left for your business. So for me, that 10% outsource fee is well worth it. And, yeah, property management, I think, is key. And I think as you get more properties, you have to make sure that your metrics are there, your KPIs, your key performance indicators. What's your vacancy rate? How much percent of rent is being collected on time? What are your maintenance costs? If you got utilities, what are your utility costs? I think you gotta have property management in place that effectively manages the tenants, protects the property, and helps you to meet your income goals. Because if not, you got to ask yourself, are they paying for themselves? Basically, are they, adding value to your business?
Yeah, no doubt. So I was listening to something, and the guy was saying like, because me, I'm a big believer in like for me, time is the only thing, right? Like money is the means to an end for me,
Mm-hmm.
and what I want is time, and I
Right.
don't want to manage my properties either because I don't want the tenants to call me. I don't want to set up the maintenance. I don't
Right.
want to do any of that stuff. So, like you said, like the 10% is well worth it for me. And I was listening to something, and the guy was like, "Are you gonna do a $10 an hour task, or are you gonna do the $40,000 task, right? Are you gonna?" And at the time, I was driving Uber, right? So
Mm.
I was living up in DC, moved back down to Norfolk. My wife wanted to go back to school full time, so I was like, all right,
Mm-hmm.
let me do a little something to make some more money, right? So
Right.
I was like,
Right.
all right, I'm gonna drive Uber. And one day I was sitting in Virginia Beach somewhere waiting for my next ride, listening to a podcast, and the guy was like, "Are you gonna do a $10 an hour task, or are you gonna get the task that's gonna get you
Mm.
$40,000?" And as I'm sitting in the car, I'm like, dang, let me go home and start this business, right? Let me go
Yeah.
start looking for this rental property and stop doing this $10 an hour
Right.
task that I'm doing, ruining my car, right?
Mm-hmm.
So keys, man. I think time is very important, and then also the property manage different strokes for different folks. Some people can manage their properties and set the
Right.
systems up and all that stuff, but just not the thing for me at this point in time.
Yeah, and I think it's key that you recognize yourself, what your strengths are.
Mm.
Figure out, what are you good at, and I think if you're doing a task and when that task is over, if you have, derived some level of satisfaction and enjoyment, maybe that's for you. But
Yeah,
if you go and you do a task and you actually dread it,
yeah,
and you're like, man, I can't, oh, my phone's ringing. That's a tenant.
yeah, yeah,
You just start to cringe.
yeah.
It's not going to be long before you're out of real estate investing, right? I'm going to be buying your house, right? Because I have purchased houses from tired landlords before I actually market to tired landlords for that specific reason.
Mm.
So getting to that place of realizing what you're good at, and you hit on another piece of it, is the $10 task or the $40,000 task. I think it's good to get that side hustle while we're trying to generate the funds,
Mhm.
but that's not the means. I mean, that's not the end game, right? You're not going to get rich driving Uber, right? You may get rich having some Uber drivers working for you,
Facts,
but
facts.
you're not going to get rich driving Uber. You're not going to get, be financially free doing those things. So just kind of like you mentioned, we talk about the Pareto principle, 20% of our activity gives us 80% of our results. The problem is many of us spend more of our time in that 80% range, but it's not really giving us any return. We're thinking we're doing something, but it's not really benefiting us in the long run. So we got to figure out what are the activities that are going to actually pay me back. What are the activities that are going to, help me to get to where I want to go, and I think that's really key.
Yeah. No doubt, no doubt. All great stuff. So let's fast forward a little bit. So you got the first property. First property was a banger. Had a bunch of properties in between. Can you tell us about, like you mentioned, you were able to close on your first house in 2021. So can you walk us through your most recent deal?
Yeah. So my most recent deal, and actually I want to say like the last two deals I've done, I purchased them for hardly any money out of my pocket.
Mm.
And so one thing I did, I want to say 2 years ago, was I started to invest in learning more about creative financing. And I love owner financing, right? Where the owner carries the note. That's my favorite type of deal. I can get into those kind of deals for, 5 grand, 10 grand, which my cash on cash return is great when I do those
Yeah,
kind of deals.
yeah.
But my last deal was actually a sandwich lease option,
Okay.
and I did a sandwich lease option. Basically, I had a guy who reached out to me, knew I was the real estate guy, and he was like, "Hey, you want to buy my house?" We looked at his numbers, and he didn't really have any equity. And I'll pretty much, when a friend comes to me, I want them to hold on to their asset, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, and they're like, "I want to sell this house." I'm like, "Please don't sell your house. Look, hold on to it. Let's figure out a way that you can actually benefit or profit from the house." Now my friend was like, man, no, I just want to be done with it. I'm tired of the house. I was, they had some personal issues associated with it, but the numbers didn't work. So what I told him, I said, hey, look, your issue right now, because they had a house and they were renting it out, but they weren't happy with their property management company. They had some just different challenges. And I said, okay, I tell you what I can do. I can come into the house and I can rent it from you. I'll be your tenant, right? I'll guarantee that the mortgage is paid every single month. And then I'm going to go find myself a tenant who in 5 years max is going to buy the house from you, right? They'll basically, I'll buy it from you and then they'll buy it from me, pretty much in a side-by-side transaction. So we set up the lease option and it didn't cost me anything other than, a couple of repairs. Sorry about that. A few repairs and things like that. So we go in and set the sandwich lease option up, sign a purchase agreement, no money from myself. And basically I go and line up a tenant buyer. I market the property, get them ready, get them pre-qualified. And they come in, they give me a $5,000 option fee, right? For the right to buy the house. So in 5 years. So essentially I really don't own the house. I'm like the middleman, but I'm getting I get an upfront payment of $5,000 for the option. I get another 3 to 350 in monthly cash flow. And then when we do sell the house in 5 years, I'm selling it for the outstanding principal, right? So when I took it over, let's say for example, it was rated at 140, right? Right now, I mean, with the value is 140, but the equity currently, the current outstanding balance is 128. Every single year that the tenant pays, that balance is dropping. So when we sell in 5 years, whatever the difference from the 140 to the outstanding principal, that comes to me, right? So I didn't spend any money out of pocket. So I basically have an infinite cash on cash return.
Yeah.
So that kind of deal, those deals are out there. And for me, I've just been learning more and more. And I think it's been critical throughout growing is to keep learning. Continuous learning, man, is everything. You got to keep adding to the toolbox. And just because one method doesn't work for a seller, you got to find other methods that will in order to make the deal work. I think I read somewhere it said that great deals aren't out there, aren't found, they're created. And for me, getting to that place of just kind of learning some of those skills have really helped me to just build my business with little cash, right? Because at the end of the day, you mentioned something that I wanted to circle back to. You said sometimes there's the guy or the gal out there who've got 9 or 10 properties, but they're not really making much money. And we look and we're like, oh my goodness, that guy's got 30 doors, 50 doors. But if all of the deals are bad, it doesn't help you, So I think getting to that place of just saying, okay, what is it? What is success for me? And not comparing me to everybody else. Comparison is the thief of joy, and we got to get to the place where we're not comparing ourselves with everybody else. We're just trying to be the best version of ourselves and meeting our own goals and objectives for ourselves and our family. So, but yeah, my most recent deal, it was a creative deal. I've done the one prior to that was a duplex that I acquired on a lease purchase, right? So this one I just did, I told you about, was a sandwich lease option, but I've also bought a duplex. I spent $4,000 for the right to buy the property in 5 years. And in 5 years, I'm paying for the outstanding principal, right? So if he bought it for 120, but right now it's at 100, because I'm getting his 20% down payment, and I'm getting a monthly debt pay down. Only thing I don't benefit from is the tax break because I don't necessarily own the house yet. Right. But I've used those kind of tactics to acquire my last 2 deals. And those are a lot of fun because you walk away and you're like, man, I didn't spend any money for those houses, and now I'm in control of them. So
yeah, I think that's a testament to one, having the tools in the toolbox, and 2, going back to that competition piece. So when you're going for a property on the MLS and you say, well, how about you lease it to me and pay me five up front, and then on the back end, I get the difference, but you still benefit. They're not trying to hear that. They're like, nah, I got somebody else.
None of that.
Gonna pay the same thing, and they're gonna pay closing costs. I don't got time for all that. So when it's less competition, you can make the deal. Like you said, great deals aren't found, they're made. So when you have less competition, you got the time and you can build a relationship to say, all right, let's make a win-win for us both. Let's talk through it. Let's spend the time to make this deal happen.
Yeah, I love doing deals in the off market space because it's, I mean, I don't want to call it the wild wild west, but you can make a deal for whatever works for you. I mean, I know people that have thrown in a boat. I mean, to make a deal work. You
Yeah.
know, they're like, okay, well, you know, oh, you like the old car in front, you can have it, right? I mean, you can do pretty much anything you want in the creative space, you know, within the confines of the law, obviously. But you know, there's so much, you have so much more freedom in those spaces. And every deal I've done in the off market space has been a lot less money out of my pocket and have been tremendously greater deals, you know, for me overall.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. All right, so what's one of the biggest mistakes you've made? I think we talked about some of your great deals, some creative deals, a lot of tools in the toolbox. So what's one of the biggest mistakes you've made over the years?
Oh my goodness, man. So too many to count, you
Yeah,
know, and I tell people all the time, I was like, in real estate, you're gonna make dumb mistakes, you know, but at the end of the day, you know, real estate, you may not think it is very forgiving, but it is somewhat of a forgiving business because over time, even if you bought a bad deal, in 30 years, technically it's going to be a good deal, right? Because at some point, you know, you'll be breaking from a cash flow perspective. But I'm gonna actually give you more than one mistake. You know, I'm gonna try to make them quick, but I'm gonna give you more than one mistake that I've made. So one mistake that I made was not doing my diligence with the city that I was investing in.
mm,
So I mentioned that I've got a few houses where I rent the individual rooms. Now, if you buy a house and you can rent out 4 or 5 rooms, you can do pretty good. So I was in one city, right? And I found out they were renting out 6 rooms. And I was like, that don't seem right.
yeah,
Because, you know, my dad had a few of them and he was like, you can do 4. So I
yeah,
called the city and this was in Hampton. Hampton's like, no, you can only do 4 unless you were grandfathered in. So if you have evidence of, you know, renting 6 before the law, then we'll let you keep doing it. There was no evidence. So I bumped it down to 4. Well, at the same time, I knew, like I said, my dad and like 2 or 3 other investors, as well as all the investors down by Newport News Shipyard. If you go down by the shipyard, you see all of these signs that say rooms for rent because they rent out to the folks in the shipyard who are driving from Carolina, you know, who got long commutes and they just want to be able to get up and go to work, right? They don't want to fight traffic. So that's a pretty lucrative area to invest in. So my understanding from talking to other investors was that I could do 5. So what do? I go down to Newport News and I gobble up a house, right? I'm like, oh, cool. I got a 4 bedroom, big, huge floor plan, got a big, nice living room. All I got to do is box in a door, close in one side of a door. I got a 5th room. I'm cash flowing $1,200 a month. Boom.
yeah,
Cool. I'm on Easy Street. So I go out buy this house probably about 3 4 months after I got tenants in there and everything. Property manager calls me. He's like, "Hey man, we got a call from the city codes and compliance folks, and they're like, we can only have 3 people in the room." And I'm in the house. I'm like, wait, what do you mean only 3? It's 5. What is he talking about?
yeah.
So we go and I do my homework, and sure enough, the rule is 3.
Three.
So I
Yeah,
now have a property, and bear in mind, because I'm basing my numbers off of 5,
yeah,
I didn't mind paying. This was MLS deal. I didn't mind paying for it. I was like, cool, yeah, that's fine. They want an extra 3,000. Cool, take
right.
it. You know, I'm just
Yeah,
like, take it, right? And come to find out, man, when that rule hit me, I'm like, oh man, I didn't. It freaked me out. You know, fortunately, I was still able to cash flow. I think about $400 a month,
mhm,
but 400 and 1,200 are very different,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
So from that standpoint, I mean, from a big perspective to me, especially if you're doing something in kind of a specialty market, do your homework. Don't go by what anybody tells you. Find out for yourself. I want to know the code. I want to know the requirements. I want to see it in writing because other people had told me and they're actually doing it. Now, am I gonna be the guy go and telling everybody else? No, but I'm the property pastor, man. I gotta have integrity,
right, right,
right? You know, I
right.
could try to get away with it, but now I'm gonna do it the right way. So you know that was a big learning lesson for me. Fortunately, thankfully, I wasn't cash flow negative. I didn't have to scramble, you know, to try to offload that asset. But it just kind of put that property, it bumped it down from a home run and it knocked it down to just barely get on first base.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, so that was a big mistake for me. And I think the other mistake I've made in my business has been with contractors.
Mm,
On a bird deal, I had a really bad contractor, and this guy, you know, he sold himself as pretty much a general contractor, but he was a specialist, and he was a framer. You know, and every contract he bought in just didn't know what they were doing. And me knowing a little bit about, construction, I'm finding all sorts of issues. So it slowed my project down. I didn't fire him fast. I should have got rid of him early, but I held on too long. I ended up working in the business. I ended up fixing things that weren't right. So sometimes, you just got to take it for what it is. Don't make it personal. Look at your relationship. Look at the people who are working for you. If they're not making you money, sometimes you just got to say, hey, this is not personal. This is business, because at the end of the day, and I got a slogan in my business. I tell my property manager, I say, hey, look, everybody's problems can't become my problems, because if they become my problems, I'm going to suffer, right? My responsibility is my wife and my 3 children, my church family. That's a whole different world if it's something in church, right? But this is business, So I think for me, I really, pulled the plug a little too late on the contractors. And fortunately, my numbers were so good on that deal that even after all the headache, let me see, I had an AC unit stolen by a contractor. I had to redo plumbing. I had to almost rewire the whole house. Pretty much every trade that came in the house messed up, except the framer, right? So it was all this work, and I was in there on weekends, Christmas time, trying to get this thing finished. But the crazy part, even after all of that, my burst still turned out great. I still didn't lose any money on it. I mean, I got all of my money back out. So that's the good part. They say you make your money when you buy. So it was a big mistake, but at the same time, it also was a benefit. There was enough safety margin in the deal where it didn't mess me up too bad. So, but yeah, man, I'm making mistakes every single day.
Yeah. Fail forward. And that's crazy. Contractor stole the AC. Like, I'm thinking it's somebody from the neighborhood.
Man, let me tell you. Yeah,
That's
contractors, man, they can make or break your business. But I've learned, with contractors now, I'm putting more and more stuff in now where it's like I used to, one of my mentors, he would have things in his contracts where he's like, hey, for my contractor, if you finish early, I'll give you a bonus.
yeah.
But if you finish late, then we're going to deduct money. And my dad was like, man, I can't believe they're doing that. Why would you do that? The stuff comes up. And it's like, yeah, I get that. But at the same time, a good contractor can estimate. And if something does change, you have that conversation. But that's different than you showing up on the job every morning at 11 o'clock and leaving at 3. Right. And my job is suffering. I may be having a hard money loan I'm waiting on. I may be having income I'm trying to get through a tenant. So that contractor, man, that whole relationship is a tricky one. And when you find a good one, take care of them because they can be hard to find.
Facts. All right. So what's the end goal for you? Like what's next? What's in the future, and what's the end goal?
Yeah, so for me, so you mentioned something about time, right? Time for me is everything as well. I want to own my own time, and I'm not the kind of cat that wants to just sit around and do nothing, right? For me, I like I said, I'm a pastor of a church, and we started that church in a high school, and it's been, by the grace of God, it's been growing every single year. But for me, I told my church leadership team, I said, look, you guys are never going to have to worry about whether or not you pay Marsay or whether or not you pay for the lights, right? So for me, I work, there's a story in the Bible where the Apostle Paul, he made tents, right? He was a tent maker and he led in the church. He said, hey, if I got to work, I got to work. And that's kind of how I am. But for me, real estate has become that vehicle to own my own time. And what I always wanted to be was, be at a place where I can invest money back into my church family, right? Where I can help other people and I can own my own time. I can go and do things in the community. We're huge in the community as far as what our passion is. So for me, it's really about owning time, and on top of that, also educating other people. I love it when a young person reaches out to me on social media, Instagram or YouTube or whatever, and they're like, hey, I saw your interview on Bigger Pockets. Can I talk? And can you show me different things? I love to teach. I love to kind of just show people things that are going to help them and their kids. And my whole thing is, if you're willing to work, I'll teach you what I know, but you got to do the work, and for me, it's just about getting to that place of owning my own time, imparting that legacy into my kids, because, my dad did some tremendous things for me. He gave me a piece of land to build my house. He helped me build my house. He taught me so much. And for me, I want my kids to start out at a better station in life than I did. So, and I think every generation should get better. So for me, it's really about that building a legacy. I call it kingdom legacy builders. We really want to get to that place of each generation getting better, and not just in a lineal fashion, but also a horizontal fashion, right? It's not just about me and mine and everything is fine. It's about the village. It's about, hey, my circle, the guys I work out with, the guys I hang out with. I'm like, bro, what I know, So that's really what it is for me. It's about freedom of time and investing in the other people as well.
Okay. All right. So I think you've given plenty of advice, but closing out, just any for those people that you say reach out on social media and all that stuff. Any other advice? Any general advice for rookies, people that are trying to get in the real estate? Any advice for those people?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is learn. Learn by listening, learn by watching, but learn by doing.
Yeah.
Connect with a mentor. And when you find a mentor, it's kind of cliche nowadays, but it still remains true. Don't just go to a person and say, "Hey, teach me everything." Be willing to add some value. I mean, one of the most frustrating things for a person, who's building their portfolio is to invest in someone they're trying to mentor, and that person just pulls away, just sucks energy, time. It's like, "Hey, I got a question for you," and they're not willing to do anything. Like some people I mentor, they'll go hang bandit signs for me. They're like, bandit signs like, "Hey, we buy houses or whatever." I don't have time to do that. But if they come and they do that, they're returning or reciprocating that value. So I would say find somebody who's already doing it, add value to them, right? If they need errands run or paint done, a yard cleaned up, signs put up, whatever, be willing, right? I mean, I have a YouTube channel. One of my guys that I work with, he helps me with editing videos. He adds value to me, right? Did my intros and things like that, things I'm not that great at, right? Add value to somebody. The other thing though, man, is when you're actually taking action, do not be afraid to fail, right? Because unfortunately, experience is the best teacher, but that's just how we're wired. You can read a million books, but until you actually go and do it, it doesn't really stick. It doesn't really generate the kind of results. So I think, get to the place of, and we could talk all the day long about cleaning up credit. We could talk all day long about, pre-quals and getting set up with realtors and things like that. But I think the big thing is action. The other thing is define your why, right? Why do you want to invest in real estate? Why do you want to build wealth? Do you just want to go sit on the beach somewhere? Which if that's the case, that's cool. But you got to have something that's going to push you forward, right? When I first started in real estate, man, that same property I told you about, the one that's a home run hitter, I think I probably spent like $2,000 in drainage problems in 1 year. And I was on the verge of like, I'm going to sell this house. But because I knew my why and I knew my end game, I was like, look, this is a fixable problem. We're going to fix this problem. We're going to get this property where it needs to be. The tenants are the ones paying for it, right? And at the end of the day, we're going to keep moving forward. So, and I'm so glad that I knew my why, because that helped me keep pushing through. So I think the piece, like I mentioned, is the education, find a mentor, connect with folks, keep learning, right? Keep learning is critical. Like I mentioned, every year I set learning goals for myself. I'm trying to constantly consume information. And that's the thing I learned. You don't arrive in this. Nothing in life will you arrive. So when you're starting out, do those things, man, and you will be successful. Create your why, know why you're doing this thing, and just stay focused on those goals, and you'll get there. Just don't quit, man. That's the biggest thing I tell people is it's too early to quit.
Don't. All right, bet. Well, look, Marsay, I truly appreciate you, and I'm trying my best not to call you Pastor Winder. My father-in-law is a pastor as well, so it's a respect thing for me. But no, I truly appreciate you coming and spending the time and giving us jewels. And I love all the podcasts and all the Instagram lives that I do, but like this one, like just the common sense advice and like the keys and the ways to get to wealth and financial freedom and getting your time back. Like this is why I do what I do. So because I know people are going to listen to this episode and they're going to say, this is attainable. All I
Right.
got to do is start with going to look at the property. Start with finding a
Right.
mentor. Start with networking. Start somewhere. Start learning. So I truly appreciate your experience and your knowledge and your time for talking to me, because this is why I do what I do, because I want people to have this information. And you gave so much good information on this episode. So I truly appreciate you.
Absolutely, man. Well, thank you for having me, man. It's been a true blessing to be with you today. And I'm rooting for you. I know you're rooting for me, and we collaborate and just build each other up, man. So if y'all got any questions for me, we'll have our information kind of in the comment section and whatnot. You can reach out and I'll answer those questions for you as well. But I appreciate the opportunity to come and just share my experiences, good, bad, and ugly, and all that kind of stuff. And nothing but love to you, man. Nothing but success wish for you and your family.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, brother. Take it easy. Have a good one. I appreciate you.
All right, man. You too. Be
All
good.
right.